She's going to go over some of these executive action. Rosa, talk to the folks here.
Thank you. So one of the executive orders that President Trump signed into law, an executive order is not a law, but it has the force of a law. One of them has to do with interior enforcement. What that means is enforcing our immigration laws in the interior by making a priority for removal, but at the same time not really having a priority. Mainly, he wants to focus on anyone who is a non-citizen that's here illegally, that has been arrested, convicted, charged, or even going as far as a person who has committed certain facts that may constitute a crime.
Wait a minute. I'm a citizen that's here undocumented or illegally, whatever you might want to say, and I just stole something out of Walmart. What would happen to me?
So what would happen right now is, depending on what jurisdiction that happens in, so what county, what city, law enforcement would come and arrest you. They would do an identity check. And sometimes through that identity check, if you're fingerprinted, it will trigger a finding that you're here illegally. The only way that would happen is if you've previously been reprimanded by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, or even Customs and Border Protection at the land border, so Mexico-U.S. border. Mainly that's when it occurs. And then it would trigger a finding that you're here illegally, you've committed a criminal offense. They'll place you in detention, in local detention, so a jail, but then ICE will have what's known as a detainer. Essentially what it says is, you're staying here until either you're charged and convicted of this offense, or let's say whatever the state attorney decides to do with you, but we're still going to have a hold on you. We're not going to let you go because we know you're here illegally.
Let me interject, because this reminds me of my time as a U.S. Marshal in D.C. Superior Court. We had the Metropolitan Police Department would arrest somebody, and they ran these checks and found out this person was illegal into the country. And once they brought him to the courthouse, the criminal hearing was already taken care of, but the judge released them on bond, but they couldn't go because ICE put a hold on them.
Correct.
And I was stuck with the person, and I had to wait 2-3 hours for the ICE agent to show up to come and take this individual. I was about to let him walk out the door because they took their sweet time. They're not in a rush to come get you. So you could sit in a jail for, 4, 5, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month before ICE come pick you up. Am I correct?
Correct. So what ends up happening in a lot of these cases is it depends being on the priority you are in terms of what you've committed. So practically speaking, there's not enough space in jails or prisons or detention centers to detain everyone. So what ends up happening is ICE then decides, okay, we're going to detain you, or we're going to let you go and do an alternative to detention. So they'll have the people check in, they'll do ankle monitors, they'll visit their home, but for all intents and purposes, they're still quote unquote detained and under ICE custody.
Right, and they can sit in the jail for 30 days, and guess what? The county residents are paying for that jail bill. Mm-hmm. The federal government's not paying for it. And that's something I have to deal with a lot. But continue on with this.
So with the interior enforcement, one of the main concerns as a practitioner of immigration law that we have is the 237G aspect. So 237G of the Immigration and Nationality Act has to do with what's known as secured communities. What that means is essentially that local law enforcement, so for here in Kissimmee, it could be Kissimmee PD or the Osceola Sheriff's Office, could enter into a contract with the Department of Homeland Security, so it's a mutual agreement between them, where the local law enforcement can then enforce immigration law. The issue with that is it creates a lot of profiling, because you essentially can stop anyone. There's two different types of enforcement. There's task force enforcement and jail enforcement. So jail enforcement already kind of exists in the sense that if you commit an offense, you're fingerprinted, and then it triggers something in ICE's system, ICE will then have a hold. But task force enforcement is the one that's very problematic. That allows local law enforcement to stop you within their line of duty. So let's say a cop is just driving down the road and they see a Hispanic female or Hispanic male walking down the street, at a grocery store, whatever it might be, they have every right to approach you and say, do you have proof of your legal status here in the U.S.? Now, to me, that kind of has an air of Gestapo Germany. I don't like it because it does not allow people to trust in law enforcement, one. It creates a combative nature with the very people that have sworn to protect the community.
I mean, if somebody was to stop me after I leave this building and say, let me see your ID, I'll tell them where to go. And it won't be to the Disneyland, I'll tell you that. But that's crazy. I don't think we need to be badgering people for their ID. I mean, I was in Washington, D.C. On any given Monday morning, there'll be tons of Mexican men standing by the 7-Eleven. Mm-hmm. And while they're standing there, they're trying to get a job and go to work. Mm-hmm. They're not trying to be arrested and deported. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Keep
No, go ahead. So essentially that's what the 237G entails. So the main issue is a potential for racial profiling, and it threatens community safety in a way because police, who are they going to focus on? The people that are committing criminal acts or people that, mind you, a person that has come here illegally has broken a federal law. We're not, discounting that. However, most of these people that come here illegally, they come here fleeing something they normally would not be able to escape.
Exactly.
And if they had a legal means to do it, they would have. But either their embassy denied them, they didn't have the means to, so they're here now, illegally. They're trying to make a life of themselves by working, paying taxes. So who's the police going to focus on? Criminals or people that are living under the radar, working as hard as they can to provide for their families?
Well, being former law enforcement, the police has a tough job as it is, sheriff, deputy, police department. And in my view, they shouldn't be acting as federal agent. That's the federal government job. And I guess Trump's going to hire a lot of federal agents to do that job.
So he's adding an additional 10,000 in the interior, an additional 5,000 at the border. The issue with the secured communities aspect is local law enforcement. All you need to do is be a U.S. citizen, have at least 1 year of law enforcement experience, and then you get a 4-week course to then be able to enforce federal law. I think that's ludicrous.
I do too. I went to 16 weeks of federal investigation school down in Glencoe, Georgia. Yeah. So and I still didn't know all the federal laws.
So you can imagine the misapplication of it.
Oh, yeah.
And the widespread nature of it. And also, it's very expensive for local municipalities because guess who funds it? The local government.
Right. And it's our tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
People say, well, you came in the country legal, you broke federal law. Well, if you didn't pay your taxes, you broke federal law too.
Correct.
So, and what do? You get a fine, and you pay them back taxes. So maybe we should just have the undocumented people pay some taxes, which they already did, paying taxes.
Many of them already do. Yeah.
Already do. But tell me some more other executive actions.
So the third executive action has to do with border security. So essentially the border security limits humanitarian parole. So what humanitarian parole is somebody who presents themselves at a physical border. People forget that we're also border countries with Canada. People kind of just look the other way. But that's also a border, a much larger border than the one between Mexico and the U.S.
Yes, it is.
But there's a huge focal point on the U.S.-Mexico border. So it limits humanitarian parole, meaning somebody presents themselves to the border and says, I fear going back to my home country for X, Y, and Z reason. It will limit the right of a customs official to parole them in, so allow them in temporarily for them to then apply for a formal area of relief like asylum. It also will increase detention at the border as well as expedited removal. So what expedited removal is you don't go through the normal routes of a deportation proceeding. It just goes by really, really fast. So
do you go be from an immigration judge?
Yes.
Okay.
You do go in front of an immigration judge, but that judge is hearing cases super quickly.
Exactly.
So the argument can be made, is the judge really considering the arguments being made? or is he just trying to churn out these cases and turning people right around?
Well, if you're going before an immigration judge and you broke the law and I'm undocumented, you know, I'm working for a minimum wage or very little below minimum wage, so I'm indigent.
Mm-hmm.
Do the federal government pays for my attorney?
Unfortunately not. A person in immigration proceedings does not have a right to free counsel. They have a right to counsel, but not one provided by the federal government.
Isn't the right to counsel is a constitutional right?
It is in criminal proceedings, just not under immigration law.
Well, if I came into the country, I broke a federal law.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a criminal law, isn't it?
In a sense. You know, it's still, you're breaking a law that will potentially have adverse effects on you, which will limit your liberty. So it's akin to a criminal law, but unfortunately, the federal government has still not observed a right to free counsel in immigration court.
Well, I think that's a travesty of justice, because I think doesn't the constitutional applies for somebody who's illegal into this country?
It does. I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is even if you're here illegally, you have certain rights, which I like to tell my clients a lot of, because people are scared. It's a scary time, and they say, oh, what should I do if immigration comes knocking at my door? Well, this is kind of a know your rights tidbit, a three-point tidbit. So let's say an ICE, officer or a couple of officers, whatever it might be, are knocking at your door, and you look through your window and you say, I'm not going to open that door. You have every right, one, not to open the door. If they want to come in and grab you in your own home, they need to slip a search warrant under that door. That search warrant needs to have your name and your address. 2, you have the right to remain silent. And 3, you have a right to contact an attorney. If you are picked up by ICE, detained, and you don't have my number, I'm just going to plug it, 407-500-0000, then you have a right to say, can I get a phone call? I want to call an attorney. And if you can't afford an attorney, ask for a pro bono list of attorneys. Now, the government won't provide you with an attorney, but there is a list of practitioners that will provide free or reduced legal services.
So you have your Fourth Amendment right.
Mm-hmm.
You have your Fifth Amendment right. Why you don't have your Sixth Amendment right? This is what I don't understand. The Constitution is supposed to apply to everyone in the United States.
Correct.
Or in United States property. So I just don't understand that. But this administration, I don't think, cares about immigration constitutional rights. Just by their actions and their words. So we
and again, just to plug my phone number in with NeJame Law, our main number is 407-500-0000.
Yeah, thank you for that. Tell me, what type of cases do you have on a daily basis?
So my days vary from day to day. That's what I love practicing immigration law. One day I could be dealing with somebody from Europe or the Middle East that wants to invest in a business in the U.S. By investing large sums of money and creating jobs. Then the next day it can be somebody who is a U.S. citizen and wants to marry somebody who's a non-citizen, or a U.S. citizen who wants to bring their mom or dad from abroad. And then another day I can have get a frantic phone call from somebody saying, my husband just got picked up by ICE. He's at X detention facility in South Florida. He committed an offense 10 years ago. What can we do? And, I try and retain my services. We can move forward. We can fight this, see what crime he committed, if he can be bonded out, and then what relief he ultimately has from staying in the U.S. So every day is very, very different.
Well, these justice procedures, what's the average it could take?
So through immigration court, through normal proceedings, there's huge backlogs. So right now in the Orlando Immigration Court, there's about 7 immigration judges for the Orlando area. Okay. The Orlando Immigration Court covers all of North Florida up to certain portions of Daytona Beach and a little bit further down. Right. Then there's 2 immigration courts in Miami that cover most of South Florida. All of these cases are backlogged, so for you to present yourself in front of a judge can take months, just for an initial proceeding, known as a master calendar hearing. But for a judge to hear out your whole case, right, known as an individual hearing, that can take 1, 2, sometimes 3 years.
And if you appeal the case?
So an additional appeal can take a year or more.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. So it's not so if the courts are being overrun with Trump roundup of undocumented people, do you think that 2 to 3 years going to get extended?
What ends up happening sometimes, the judge does not have enough time, so he'll have to reschedule the hearing. Or you can ask for a faster hearing, but most of the time, when it comes to people facing removal, they want time in the U.S. They want to remain here, they want to keep working, they want to be here with their families. And eventually, face their individual hearing and make their argument so that they can permanently stay here with a valid status. There's a potential to extend your hearing, but what ends up happening is people just have to wait until their case is heard.
I just want to, I'm not trying to get any legal advice here, but I just have, a thought just came to my head. Let's say, hypothetically, I married someone who I found out before I got married, or just before I'm going to marry them, or after I got married, they're here illegally. And we get married, and a year later, we have a child. And now ICE is coming to arrest my wife. What would happen to her status being here?
Okay, just to plug, this is not legal advice,
No,
but
not.
in this scenario, when you file to become a legal permanent resident, one of the requirements is having been inspected and admitted. In short, having a legal entry. So if you come here illegally, there's only certain ways that you can then get a green card or legal permanent resident.
Right.
From being married to a U.S. citizen. So you still have to, absent certain circumstances, one of the ways is you still have to apply for a waiver, which is essentially an excuse for you having entered illegally. But the requirement is showing that your U.S. citizen spouse would suffer extreme hardship if you were removed. Unfortunately, immigration did not consider that particular case, that particular waiver, they do not consider hardship to a U.S. citizen child. Only to qualifying relatives, so either a legal permanent resident or a spouse or parent.
Would it be a hardship, a mother of a 2-year-old being deported?
Oh, of course. Immigration only considers certain types of hardship. It doesn't limit it to it, but for the most part, they look at these. It has to do with financial hardship, medical hardship, educational hardship. So let's say the U.S. citizen spouse suffers from some type of medical ailment. Let's say that the non-citizen spouse is the main breadwinner. That's a financial hardship.
Right.
Educational hardship. Let's say the non-citizen is the main breadwinner and the citizen spouse is in school for nursing, for example.
Right.
If that non-citizen spouse wasn't here, making the dollars every day, going to work, how is this citizen going to continue her education? That provides a hardship.
Wow. Well, we have some serious issues in this country. I don't think it's going to be resolved through the Trump administration or any administration. Congress and the citizens of this country need to step up.
Of course.
We need to take some action.
I completely agree.
And one of the action items for this hour of Foster Expert, I want you to contact your U.S. Senate. Senator Rubio office is 904-398-8586, or Senator Bill Nelson office is 407, right here in Orlando, 407-872-7161. Contact your congressman, your U.S. Senate, and tell them to fix this problem. People need to start calling in, getting with organizations that help undocumented people. We just not stand out there and wave a sign and protest. We need to take some real action to